Yeah, I'm really excited to present this work to you. It's really very new, very fresh. I literally collected my first pilot data on it yesterday, so I would really appreciate any feedback that you all can provide at this stage because it's still very early on. But this project of mine will use virtual reality and EEG to understand active and passive touch in autistic adults. So just a little background on the motivation behind this study. So I really wanted to work on something to better understand sensory sensitivities in autism with a focus on hypersensitivity to touch. So we know that hyper and hyposensitivities to different sensory experiences are very common in autism. And it's also been found that the predictability of whatever's happening, the different stimuli, can affect people's sensitivity to the different things. So if something is very predictable, then you're less likely to be very sensitive to it because you can expect it, you know when it's going to happen. You can predict things about the intensity, but things that are unpredictable, when you can't know exactly when it's going to happen or how it's going to feel, these things can cause anxiety, which can in turn cause additional hypersensitivity. In the same vein of things, self-stimulatory actions, also known as stimming, have been shown to help people regulate these perceptual inputs to decrease the amount of sensitivity they have to different inputs. So this is kind of the vein of research that I wanted to focus on. So to start off, I wanted to just kind of clarify the differences between what I mean with active touch and passive touch. So active touch, that's when you reach out and you're touching something on your own. So it's self-generated, it's dynamic, and it's predictable because you could say, I'm going to reach out and touch this table. I know exactly when it's going to happen. I know how much force I'm going to apply. So it's a lot more predictable in that sense. Whereas passive touch is when something else comes out and touches you. So it's externally generated. It's you yourself are static because you're not the one reaching out to touch something else. And it's unpredictable because you don't know exactly what the sensation is going to feel like. And it's been shown that these two types of touch activate different areas of the brain. So what do we know about passive touch in autism? So empirically from research, there have been plenty of caregiver reports of tactile hyper and hyposensitivities. There's beginning to be a little bit more self-report as well more recently, which is great. There's also been some research on how autistic people have greater skin conductance in response to tactile stimulation. And with the rubber hand illusion, which is, as you can see in the image below, when you obscure someone's hand and put kind of a model hand in their view instead, and then do things like stroke both of the hands to see how quickly and how much people embody something that is not theirs as their own body part. Autistic people have been shown to be less susceptible to the kind of tactile illusion of the rubber hand. And then anecdotally, there's plenty of people who have self-reported that things like unexpected touch tend to be a lot more jarring and unpleasant. So then what do we empirically know about active touch in autism? The answer is very little. And that's because active touch is really very challenging to study. And why is that? So there's a couple different things that play into that. One of them is that active touch involves movement. You have to move out and be touching something for this to truly be active touch. And this movement of the person who is being studied presents a lot of challenges to a lot of different techniques typically used to study the brain. Things like MRI and EEG really just don't lend themselves well to studying moving subjects. Another challenge is that we need to be able to measure what's happening when people are moving. So we need to be able to track what happens when a person moves. And the third part is that active touch is interactive. You need to be able to get sensation back after you move to touch something. So enter the Oculus Quest 2 as a way to help us overcome these issues that I just talked about. So the Quest 2, it's mobile, it's interactive, we can have 3D visual presentations, it's Bluetooth capable, and it can also track your hands. So my experiment uses 3 different pieces of technology to study active and passive touch. So the first piece is using EEG, so that will record the brain activity throughout the entire experiment. The second uses the oculus to provide some visual targets. And the third uses an Arduino microprocessor to provide haptic feedback that is then paired with the visual feedback to create kind of the illusion that you're about to touch something, and then also providing the haptic feedback that you are actually touching something. Still though, in a very tightly controlled situation that we can kind of create in a very scientific way and record the brain activity during. So this is kind of the basic structure of the task. So in the passive version, there is a target in VR that will move and touch the hand. Whereas in the active version, the person moves their hand out to touch the target. So they're very similar, except in what is moving to touch the other object. So then to add the haptic feedback on, we add this layer using the Arduino device. So we have a little mini motor disc velcroed around the fingertip that will vibrate every time the hand touches the target. So in the passive condition, it happens when the target moves to touch the hand. And in the active condition, it happens when the hand moves to touch the target. You just receive a very short, pretty gentle vibration on the fingertip. And then throughout all of this, we will be recording brain activity using EEG. So the EEG allows us to measure the relative amount of activity in response to receiving either the passive or the active vibration. So what does this look like in real life? So within virtual reality, you have the hand rendering that you reach out and you touch a target, and then you come back and it resets, and people just kind of do that over and over again. And then, as I said, collected just yesterday, so very new. This is what it looks like from the outside. So we have this device kind of strapped around their hand that will vibrate every time their hand reaches out to touch that virtual object. And you can see the EEG cap on underneath the VR headset. So does it work? So like I said, this is all very new. So this is based off of an N of one, just one person. But the data that we collected yesterday is very promising. So on the left here, you can see this is some of the EEG pilot data that I've collected in neurotypical adults that is just passive. So this is just them receiving the vibration without any active motion. Whereas on the right, this is the one data set that we've collected on what the brain is doing when it receives a vibration caused by an active movement. So still very preliminary, but very encouraging and exciting that the result looks like true brain activity. It's not just some, random array of squiggles. So to add another layer to this, we're going to be doing something called a mismatch negativity. So this is a phenomenon that's measurable by EEG, and it's a biomarker for the brain's ability to detect something unexpected. So with this, we basically have a long stream of different stimuli, where 80% of them are one thing and 20% of them are a little different. So it creates the expectation that you're going to feel something repeatedly, and then every now and then you feel something different. So in this case, we're using duration as the qualifier there. So the majority of the vibrations people feel are 100 milliseconds long, and every now and then they get one that's 130 milliseconds long. And in the graph on the right there, you can see right around 150 to 200 milliseconds, there's a divergence between the two lines there. And that is what we call the mismatch negativity. So it's the brain's detection of something unexpected. So using the mismatch negativity layered on this EEG experiment, we're able to kind of put together this 2x2 chart of things that are predictable and unpredictable, and things that are externally initiated and self-initiated, to really understand the role of predictability and also the role of volition in touch, and whether having something be active versus passive affects how the brain processes it. So my hypothesis is that this passive deviant condition, where things are externally initiated And unpredictable is where we're going to see the biggest difference between the neurotypical and the autistic brain activity, because that seems to line up most anecdotally with hypersensitivities in autistic people. So what will we learn from this? With that 2x2 graph, we'll be able to show how neurotypical and autistic brains process tactile input that is passive versus active, and then also predictable versus unpredictable. And the implications of this, and what I hope we'll be able to kind of take from this project moving forward, is a greater understanding of things that cause tactile avoidance as well as tactile seeking in autism, and then also more about the role of predictability in hypersensitivity in autism, and how we can use that information to improve adaptations and accommodations for different sensory preferences. And then beyond all of that, kind of larger goal of mine is to work towards destigmatizing self-stimulatory behaviors. So self-stimulatory behaviors or stimming, those are active movements. And if we can show that within autistic people that the brain is doing something different when touch is received in an active versus a passive way, then we might be able to show that stimming has this beneficial regulatory behavior on a neurocognitive level. Right now, there's really only anecdotal evidence for it, but having that hard biological evidence, I think, would go pretty far in destigmatizing stimming. These are my citations. A lot of thanks to my lab and all the people who have helped me get this project together, and will help it continue to launch in the coming months. And then I am happy to answer any questions.